Good afternoon. Joe Weinberg, Bluebird Semaphore. And this afternoon we're going to be doing World History for Ordinary People, number 28. And the reason why I'm doing this one particularly is and I talked about this, the Ocean City Free Public Library is open, has pretty decent hours, 11 to 4, I believe 6 days a week. Decent hours, and of course, like I said, they have a fairly large circulation in that library. And just a little aside, they do charge for non-residents of Ocean City, New Jersey. They charge $25 to get a card, and I think it has to be renewed at that number every year. Anyway, I said, well, I got to do this. So I went up there. It's a lovely town, and I talked to the two wonderful people behind it's not the circulation desk, maybe it is, behind the desk there. And they informed me, well, yeah, we do charge $25, but we can't collect that from you now. Once again, because of the coronavirus and COVID, I guess the touching of money is a no-no. So, but they said, but no problem, we'll give you the card today. And then as time goes on, eventually when these rules we no longer have need for them, then we're going to collect our $25. So I thought, what a nice gesture. So bang, I got the library card, and I looked at this shelves briefly because I had to be other places that day. But I did find 3 books, and I just want to talk to you about them briefly. And that, for the most part, is the business of this discussion, World History 28. So, without any further ado, I found this book. And this book is The March of the Barbarians. And it's by Harold Lamb. And I think it was printed and published in 1941. I'm sure about the date, 1941. Anyway, this person, Harold Lamb, history writer, and when I looked him up on the internet, I see that he's more than that. He's been involved with a number of Hollywood movies, most of them seemingly the glamorous type, like the Ben-Hurs and there's all sorts of those things. The Hollywood ancient civilization movies that are all glamour mostly. Glamour and costumes and excitement and adventure. And certainly Ben-Hur is just one of them, Spartacus. You can go on and on and on. But the one that really struck home with me was one that was titled The Golden Horde. Well, of course that would strike a chord with me, because they're very important people in this time frame that I'm talking about, which is the time frame is any way you want it to be in this section, but they certainly were involved in many of the coming and goings on the Silk Road in its early days, in its middle days, and its latter days. So, without trying to get too carried away with that movie, there was a number of others that seemed to have related type titles for this guy, Harold Lamb. And I don't know how historically accurate or what's going to be in those movies, but I'm going to try to get the Golden Horde and see for myself. But I started to read the book. I find that it's very right on topic for me. And I just will point out one brief section because it also is striking on a piece that I talked to in World History 27, I believe. I said I wanted to try to find, I'd always been interested in the stratification of societies, and I said that I came across some evidence that in the 13th century, due to what seemed to be a good reason to go into a monetary type of economy monetization that would help facilitate commerce. They did that, but one of the side effects was that people, particularly who were the wealthy merchants, they now had an opportunity to put away their wealth in the form of coins. Before that, they really couldn't, and I said it in the other talk that, if you traded a camel for a horse, what are you going to do? Save the horse? No, you had to keep trading and trading and trading. Now they could trade. If they made enough profit, they could put a few coins away. Eventually, they had enough coins to buy themselves luxury items. And as they bought more and more and got more and more luxury items, they said, hey, look at me. I'm a big shot. I'm better than these other people. And they started to stratify their societies. So they distanced themselves from the less fortunate who didn't have as much money saved away in the form of coinage. Okay, and of course some people, the masses at the bottom, had no coinage. So they can never join the ranks of the wealthy. That being said, so now we're talking about the barbarians, which is a lot earlier than what was being talked about in the 13th century there, and going to monetization. So what this author has uncovered is that and I think we're talking about the Mongols here, these the nomads of the steppes, right? And there's many different tribes, nomads, and I haven't gone back enough to find out if he's talking exactly about the Mongols or in general. For example, if they say the Tartars, well, the Mongols and the Tartars were very related, So they mention Tartars right here in this little excerpt, but very related, similarly located, far reaches of Mongolia, and then they raided out of there. So he goes on to this with a little preamble here. The riders of each clan became a natural army capable of moving at great speed and of enduring hardships that would decimate an army on foot. These hordes, and as an aside, he mentions the word ordus, which looks a little Latin to me, as if ordus is a Latin word of hordes. And, if you break ordus apart, you almost see the entire word of hordes in it. So these hordes, or ordus, commands of these hordes began to defeat the Chinese armies of defense, made up of heavy chariots and masses of spearmen on foot. The Tartars, quote unquote, a Chinese chronicler of the time complains, make war a business. So he's saying the Tartars make war of business, a business. They eat the meat and drink the milk of their herds, which move about seeking pasture. Every man is skilled with his bow. In time of peace, he takes life easily and enjoys it. On the other hand, in China, one class is opposed to another, so that many must slave for the luxury of those above them. Only by tilling the land and cultivating silkworms can food and clothing be had. So there you have it. Another example of the growing taste for the division of labor and the stratification of society. And, one would think that the Chinese would have done this on their own without the pressure of these raiding nomadic hordes. But certainly that pressure from those people was great China lived in absolute fear of the raiders from the north, the raiders from the west. So much so that it would gather up armies, hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and march to try to stop these people, generally getting wrecked themselves. But that's what they did because they were fearful of the nomads of the steppes, the nomads of Central Asia. And of course, that's part of the reason for the Great Wall and part of the reasons for many other things. So that was a little excerpt from Harold Lamb's The March of the Barbarians. Now, I don't anticipate reading excerpts from these books that often, but if I deem it, fairly central to what I've been talking about, or that will shed extraordinary light on this, because once again, this history for ordinary people is, in my estimation, merely to give all of us a glance backward of who we are, where we came from, what the history of humankind is, without any particular slant, except my slant. Obviously, I have to affect what I'm thinking about and collecting. It's my slant, but it really isn't a slant, because I don't think I'm coming from anywhere other than a joy of knowing history and a similar joy in discussing it with other people. And I have found that this YouTube mechanism is a very convenient way for me to do that. Now, second book is a much more, in my estimation, scholarly book. And it's an anthology of translations, classical Chinese literature, an anthology of translations. And this is only volume 1. And you can see how thick that book is. And this is so they obviously, the authors didn't write this Chinese literature. The Chinese did, but it's edited by John Minford and Joseph S.M. Lau. And it's publishers by Columbia. I gotta put my glasses on. Well, it's a strange looking spelling of Columbia, so it's probably not. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But one of it says the Chinese University Press. Now, once again, something reached out right away, and I thought it was quite a deep statement. So I'm going to have to read the whole paragraph, I think, so that you get the essence of what I'm thinking is fairly deep. It's towards the end of the paragraph. When, that's W-E-N, in pattern, when or pattern. So when being the Chinese word meaning pattern, is a very great virtue indeed. It is born together with heaven and earth. Why do we say this? Because all color patterns are mixed of black and yellow, and all shape patterns are differentiated by round and square. The sun and moon, like two pieces of jade, manifest the patterns of heaven. Mountains and rivers, in their beauty, display the pattern of earth. These are, in fact, the pattern, when, of the Tao itself. And as one sees above the sparkling heavenly bodies, and below the manifold forms of earth, so there is established a difference between high and low estate, giving the rise to the two archetypical forms, yin and yang. Man and man alone forms with these the great Trinity. I think I should read that again. Man and man alone forms with these the great Trinity. And he does so because he alone is endowed with spirituality. He is the refined essence of the five elements, indeed, the mind of the universe. And that's the end of that paragraph. And so what I'm saying, why I thought that was pretty deep, is that, and this is the very beginning of this introduction to this book, is that here we are asserting, first of all, to a common concept that we have in many civilizations, in particularly their religious philosophies, the concept of a trinity. And a little further into this talk, in the beginning of this book, he talks about how the Chinese script is not based on, as you know, is not based on alphabets, letters that make up words, so that when you read the word, you say, oh, that's tree. Okay, I know what a tree is, and you go from there. They point out in this book, and I'm not making this up, they point out in this book that what they do is they have a symbol on the page, and their mind, in going over these symbols, is instantaneously forming those ideas. What comes along with the symbols, whether it's a blue sky, whether it's a flock of flying geese, they're immediately thinking those thoughts that the symbols are trying to symbolize. So, in my estimation, they're not taking a slightly second step from first figuring out the word and then putting the image of that word in their mind. They are going right to the image in their mind. So they're reading, and just flooding by them is the blue sky, the birds, and the beautiful silky clouds, and off to the side, the two lovers singing a duet. It's all going on. And to me, it seems a more efficient way to think. Unfortunately for me, it's a little too late to try to learn Chinese. A little too late. Perhaps if I did, I could become a great chess master. But I don't think that's going to happen. And listen, I really don't care. Listen, I've had a good run, as my wife loves to say. And, it's nice. It's nice to do some inquiry. Remember, life without inquiry is not worth living. Whose idea was that? That was pretty much either Socrates or Plato, and everybody picked up on that, and they try to make it their own. But, so the third book I got from the library this week, this is interesting because, well, I'll tell you what the name is, The Secret History of the Mongol Queens. Now that title, I had just read it somewhere else, probably doing some investigation online, and this was brought up. And it's by Jack Weatherford. And so I was amazed. I go to the library, and there it is, first thing I see. The Secret History of the Mongol Queens. And I'm not going to read anything from this book, but I'm going to just tell you a little bit, is that the Mongols, and maybe others, but the Mongols were very secretive about their history. They didn't want anybody to know who they were, where they came from, or how they lived their lives. They didn't want anybody to know that. If anything, they would pour out misinformation. Hey, welcome to our world. But the one manuscript they have, it was something about the secret lives of the Mongols. So they did have one manuscript, at least one. And when that manuscript was discovered, it was noticed that a large section had been torn out. So right away, the people who did the discovery, they knew that there was a section missing from the secret history of the Mongol people. But they got a little clue because on a page just before after they think the section was torn out, there was reference to one of these Mongol women. All right? So then, with that clue, they went about discovering and patching things together, and now they know. They know that, first of all, the Mongol women were every much a radiant warrior as their menfolk. The Mongol women were every much capable of becoming the leader of their clan, of their tribe. The leader. There wasn't anybody else who was the leader, and she was like the second leader. The leader. And there was hundreds of these women folk. And this was all taken out. I believe, I'm not for sure, but I think it was taken out in the 19th century or something like that. Maybe somebody had an axe to grind, but maybe they didn't. I don't know why they did that. But now it's come to light that the women played a major role in Mongol life. Not to think that they wouldn't anyhow, because, you still have to keep the home fires burning. You still got to, nurture and nourish and do all that stuff. But they also were warrior queens. And that being said, I'm sure you all know that life on the steppes for these nomads meant living in those rounded huts, right? I'm sure we've all heard the term yurt, Y-U-R-T. We probably also come across occasionally another term, ger, G-E-R. And you say, boy, they're talking about the same thing. I know they are. Well, yes, they are. And depending on where you're writing or who you're writing about, you'll see it pop in either way, ger or yurt. And know this, the Tibetan people lived in these ger and yurts. So did the people all over the steppes, and they've become quite popular. Actually, you could buy a yurt kit or a ger kit and put one up in your backyard. Quite frankly, probably one of the better home designs you can come across. And some of them, like the one that they showed when they had the Genghis Khan exhibit in Philadelphia, just exquisite inside. They had the greatest tapestry rugs on the walls and artifacts, beautiful stuff. You lived in there, you had that cozy fire, you had your family all around you. What more do you want? Television? Give me a break. Anyway, so what I next decided to read, because this book has been staring at me for over a year, and I just discard it every time I see it, because it's called Ruska, and I'm saying to myself, at least spell it right, Russia, but I know why they're doing it, because early on in the story, fictitiously or not, the early village is going to be one called Ruska. So it says it right here, it's a novel of Russia. And this is the well-regarded author, Edward Rutherford. I say well-regarded because he's already, by the time he writes this, he already has at least 2 or 3 other big-time historical novels under the belt. One called Sarum, which traces England from Paleolithic times forward. I don't know how much forward, because I never finished the book. And my wife always raves about it. It's just so wonderful. He's got another one, right, London. And so I think that one is also going to be wonderful, if I ever read it. Who knows? But my wife, like I said, had told me that I should read Sarum, and I didn't finish it. And she told me about this. Well, she didn't tell me. I just saw it and saw it and saw it. And finally said, let me pick it up and see what it's about. Well, it's right on. It's hitting exactly on a piece of this Silk Road, Central Asia, East Asia, a piece that really wasn't included in that, because now we're going to the real extremities of the steppes out in the west, out where I would place it exactly just a tad east of current day Ukraine, and of course it's going to scatter around all over. Already he's mentioning things that were happening on the eastern side of the steppes that were affecting them. So I'm getting my hook into East Asia extended via this novel. And that's one of the wonderful things about a good historical novel, that you will get these pieces of true history tied together in a nice little story that you enjoy reading. Now, I mentioned this aspect of the East being tied in with this book, and that caused me to think in a slightly different term of why this was all relevant to what I'm talking about. And I'm just having a little problem bringing that back to mind. This is what I wanted to say, is that now that I'm back in the library again, you know the old song, back in the library again, back when a book is a friend, you know the old song. So now I can start to redo what I was doing in the beginning. If you remember, I did something on Poland, and then I was doing something on the Reformation. Well, I want to now go back and do things on that side of the world, probably more Central Europe, Poland, and then continue west, so that eventually I'll be doing a little Western civilization. Definitely want to get right back on Poland, because Poland is a good pivot point between East and West, and a major cultural center during its heyday with 1400, about 1500. Poland was big. So that being said, I'm going to wrap up World History for Ordinary People 28. And thanks for listening. And if I missed anything, I didn't mean to, but do come back again. Thank you. Bye.